Why the clock stopped. Mr. Morph and Mary Morph, his sister, were sitting on either side of their drawing room fire on a Friday evening in November when they heard a ring at the front door. They both started and showed symptoms of nervous disturbance. They both said aloud that no doubt it was a parcel or something of the kind that had rung at the front door, and they both bent their eyes again on the respective books which they were reading. Then they heard voices in the lobby, the servant's voice and another voice, and a movement of steps over the encaustic tiles towards the door of the drawing room. And Miss Morph ejaculated, "Really?" as though she was unwilling to believe that somebody on the other side of that drawing room door contemplated committing a social outrage. She nevertheless began to fear the possibility. In the ordinary course, it is not considered outrageous to enter a drawing room, even at 9 o'clock at night, with the permission and encouragement of the servant in charge of portals. But the case of the Morphs was peculiar. Mr. Morph was a bachelor aged 42 and looked older. Mary Morph was a spinster aged 38 and looked 37. Brother and sister had kept house together for 20 years. They were passionately and profoundly attached to each other and did not know it. They grumbled at each other freely and practiced no more conversation when they were alone than the necessities of existence demanded. Even at meals they generally read, but still their mutual affection was tremendous. Moreover, they were very firmly fixed in their habits. Now, one of these habits was never to entertain company on Friday night. Friday night was their night of solemn privacy. The explanation of this habit offers a proof of the sentimental relations between them. Mr. Morph was an accountant. Indeed, he was the accountant in Bursley, and perhaps he knew more secrets of the ledgers of the principal earthenware manufacturers than some of the manufacturers did themselves. But he did not live for accountancy. At 5 o'clock every evening he was capable of absolutely forgetting it. He lived for music. He was organist of St. Luke's Church, with an industrious understudy, for he did not always rise for breakfast on Sundays, and more important, he was conductor of the Bursley Orpheus Glee and Madrigal Club, and herein lay the origin of those Friday nights. A glee and madrigal club naturally comprises women as well as men, and the women are apt to be youngish, prettyish, and somewhat fond of music. Further, the conductorship of a choir involves many and various social encounters. Now Mary Morph was jealous. Though Richard Morph ruled his choir with whips, though his satiric tongue was a scorpion to the choir, though he never looked twice at any woman, though she was always saying that she wished he would marry, Mary Morph was jealous. It was Mary Morph who had created the institution of the Friday night, and she had created it in order to prove, symbolically and spectacularly, to herself, to him, and to the world, that he and she lived for each other alone. All their friends, every member of the choir, in fact the whole of the respectable part of Barsley, knew quite well that in the Morphs' house Friday was sacredly Friday. And yet a caller. "It's a woman," murmured Mary. Until her ear had assured her of this fact, she had seemed to be more disturbed than startled by the stir in the lobby. And it was a woman. It was Miss Eva Heracles, one of the principal contraltos in the Glee and Madrigal Club. She entered richly blushing and excusably a little nervous and awkward. She was a tall, agreeable creature of fewer than 30 years. Dark, almost handsome, with fine lips and eyes, and an effective large hat and a good muff. In every physical way a marked contrast to the thin, prim, desiccated brother and sister. Richard Morph flushed faintly. Mary Morph grew more pallid. "I really must apologize for coming in like this," said Eva as she shook hands cordially with Mary Morph. She knew Mary very well indeed, for Mary was the librarian of the Glee and Madrigal Club. Mary never missed a rehearsal, though she cared no more for music than she cared for the national debt. She was a perfect librarian, and very good at unofficially prodding indolent members into a more regular attendance too. "Not at all," said Mary. "We were only reading. You aren't disturbing us in the least." Which, though polite, was a lie, and Eva Heracles sat down between them, and brother and sister abandoned their literature. "I can't stop," said she, glancing at the clock immediately in front of her eyes. "I must catch the last car for Silverhaze." "You've got 20 minutes yet," said Mr. Morph. "Because," said Eva, "I don't want that walk from Turnhill to Silverhaze on a dark night like this." "No, I should think not, indeed," said Mary Morph. "You've got a full 20 minutes, Mr. Morph repeated. The clock showed 3 minutes past 9. The electric cars to and from the town of Turnhill were rumbling past the very door of the Morphs every 5 minutes, and would continue to do so till midnight. But Silverhaze is a mining village a couple of miles beyond Turnhill, and the service between Turnhill and Silverhaze ceases before 10 o'clock. Eva's father was a colliery manager who lived on the outskirts of Silverhaze. "I've got a piece of news," said Eva. "Yes?" said Mary Morph. Mr. Morph was taciturn. He stooped to nourish the fire. "About Mr. Loggerheads," said Eva, and stared straight at Mary Morph. "About Mr. Loggerheads," Mary Morph echoed, and stared back at Eva, and the atmosphere seemed to have been thrown into a strange pulsation. Here perhaps I ought to explain that it was not the peculiarity of Mr. Loggerhead's name that produced the odd effect. Loggerheads is a local term for a harmless plant called the knapweed, Centaurea nigra, and it is also the appellation of a place and of quite excellent people, and no one regards it as even the least bit odd. I'm told, said Eva, that he's going into the Hanbridge Choir. Mr. Loggerheads was the principal tenor of the Bursley Glee and Madrigal Club, and he was reckoned one of the finest after-dinner tenors in the Five Towns. The Hanbridge Choir was a rival organization, a vast and powerful affair that fascinated and swallowed promising singers from all the choirs of the vicinity. The Hanbridge Choir had sung at Windsor, and since that event there had been no holding it. All other choirs hated it with a homicidal hatred. I'm told, Eva proceeded, that the Birmingham and Sheffield Bank will promote him to the cashiership of the Hanbridge branch on the understanding that he joins the Hanbridge Choir. Shows what influence they have, and it shows how badly the Hanbridge Choir wants him. Mr. Loggerheads was cashier of the Bursley branch of the Birmingham and Sheffield Bank. Who told you? Asked Mary Morph curtly. Richard Morph said nothing. The machinations of the manager of the Hanbridge Choir always depressed and disgusted him into silence. Oh, said Eva Heracles, it's all about, by which she meant that it was in the air. Everyone's talking of it. And do they say Mr. Loggerheads has accepted? Mary demanded. Yes, said Eva. Well, said Mary, it's not true. A mistake, she added. How do you know it isn't true? Mr. Morph inquired doubtfully. Since you're so curious, said Mary defiantly. Mr. Loggerheads told me himself. When? The other day. You never said anything to me, protested Mr. Morph. It didn't occur to me, Mary replied. Well, I'm very glad, remarked Eva Heracles, but I thought I ought to let you know at once what was being said. Mary Morph's expression conveyed the fact that in her opinion Eva Heracles' evening call was a vain thing, too lightly undertaken and conceivably lacking in the nicest discretion. Whereupon Mr. Morph was evidently struck by the advisability of completely changing the subject, and he did change it. He began to talk about certain difficulties in the choral parts of Havergal Brian's Vision of Cleopatra, a work which he meant the Bursley Glee and Madrigal Club to perform, though it should perish in the attempt. Growing excited in his dry way concerning the merits of this composition, he rose from his easy chair and went to search for it. Before doing so, he looked at the clock, which indicated 20 minutes past 9. Am I all right for time? Asked Eva. Yes, you're all right, said he. If you go when that clock strikes past and take the next car down, you'll make the connection easily at Turnhill. I'll put you into the car. Oh, thanks, said Eva. Mr. Morph kept his modern choral music beneath a broad seat under the bow window. The music was concealed by a low curtain that ran on a rod, the ingenious device of Mary. He stooped down to find the Vision of Cleopatra, and at first he could not find it. Mary walked towards that end of the drawing room with a vague notion of helping him, and then Eva did the same, and then Mary walked back, and then Mr. Morph happily put his hand on the Vision of Cleopatra. He opened the score for Eva's inspection, and began to hum passages and to point out others, and Eva also began to hum, and they hummed in concert, at intervals exclaiming against the wantonness with which Havergal Brian had invented difficulties. Eva glanced at the clock. You're all right, Mr. Morph assured her somewhat impatiently, and he too glanced at the clock. You've still nearly 10 minutes, and proceeded with his critical and explanatory comments on the Vision of Cleopatra. He was capable of becoming almost delirious about music. Mary Morph had seated herself in silence. At last, Eva and Mr. Morph approached the fire and the mantelpiece again. Mr. Morph shut up the score, dismissed his delirium, and looked at the clock, quite prepared to see it pointing to 29.5 minutes past 9. Instead, the clock pointed to only 22 minutes past 9. By Jove, he exclaimed. He went nearer. By Jove, he exclaimed again, rather more loudly. I do believe that clock stopped. It had. The pendulum hung perpendicular, motionless, dead. He was astounded, for the clock had never been known to stop. It was a presentation clock of the highest guaranteed quality, offered to him as a small token of regard and esteem by the members of the Bursley Orpheus Glee and Madrigal Club to celebrate the 12th anniversary of his felicitous connection with the said society. It had stood on his mantelpiece for 4 years and had earned an absolutely first-class reputation for itself. He wound it up on the last day of every month, for it was a 30-odd-day clock, specially made by a famous local expert, and he had not known it to vary more than 10 minutes a month at the most. And lo, it had stopped in the very middle of the month. Did you wind it up last time? Asked Mary. Of course, he snapped. He had taken out his watch and was gazing at it. He turned to Eva. It's 20 to 10, he said. You've missed your connection at Turnhill. That's a certainty. I'm very sorry. Obviously, there was only one course open to a gallant man whose clock was to blame, namely, to accompany Eva Heracles to Turnhill by car, to accompany her on foot to Silverhaze, then to walk back to Turnhill and come home again by car. A young woman could not be expected to perform that bleak and perhaps dangerous journey from Turnhill to Silverhaze alone after 10 o'clock at night in November. Such was the clear course, but he dared scarcely suggest it. He dared scarcely suggest it because of his sister. He was afraid of Mary. The names of Richard Morph and Eva Heracles had already been coupled in the mouth of gossip. And naturally, Eva Heracles herself could not suggest that Richard should sally out and leave his sister alone on this night specially devoted to sisterliness and brotherliness. And of course, Eva thought, Mary will never suggest it. But Eva was wrong there. To the amazement of both Richard and Eva, Mary calmly said, "Well, Dick, the least you can do now is to see Miss Heracles home. You'll easily be able to catch the last car back from Turnhill if you start at once. I dare say I shall go to bed." And in 3 minutes, Richard Morph and Eva Heracles were being sped into the night by Mary Morph. The Morphs' house was at the corner of Trafalgar Road and Beach Street. The cars stopped at that corner in their wild course towards the town and towards Turnhill. A car was just coming. But instead of waiting for it, Richard Morph and Eva Heracles deliberately turned their backs on Trafalgar Road and hurried side by side down Beach Street. Beach Street is a short street and ends in a nondescript, unlighted waste patch of ground. They arrived in the gloom of this patch, safe from all human inquisitiveness, and then Richard Morph warmly kissed Eva Heracles in the mathematical center of those lips of hers. And Eva Heracles showed no resentment of any kind, nor even shame, yet she had been very carefully brought up. The sight would have interested Bursley immensely. It would have appealed strongly to Bursley's strong sense of the piquant. That dry old stick Dick Morph kissing one of his contraltos in the dark at the bottom end of Beach Street. "Then you hadn't told her," murmured Eva Heracles. "No," said Richard with a slight hesitation. "I was just going to begin to tell her when you called." Another woman might have pouted to learn that her lover had exhibited even a little cowardice in informing his family that he was engaged to be married. But Eva did not pout. She comprehended the situation and the psychology of the relations between brothers and sisters. She herself possessed both brothers and sisters. All the courting had been singularly secret and odd. "I shall tell her tomorrow morning at breakfast," said Richard firmly, "unless, after all, she isn't gone to bed when I get back." By a common impulse, they now returned towards Trafalgar Road. "I say," said Richard, "what made you call?" "I was passing," said the beloved, "and somehow I couldn't help it. Of course, I knew it wasn't true about Mr. Loggerheads, but I had to think of something." Richard was in ecstasy, had never been in such ecstasy. "I say," he said again, "I suppose you didn't put your finger against the pendulum of that clock?" "Oh, no," she replied with emphasis. "Well, I'm jolly glad it did stop anyway," said Richard. "What a lark, eh?" She agreed that the lark was ideal. They walked down the road till a car should overtake them. "Do you think she suspects anything?" Eva asked. "I'll swear she doesn't," said Richard positively. "It'll be a bit of a startler for the old girl. No doubt you've heard," said Eva haltingly, "that Mr. Loggerheads has cast eyes on Mary." "And do you think there's anything in that?" Richard questioned sharply. "Well," she said, "I really don't know," meaning that she decidedly thought that Mary had been encouraging advances from Mr. Loggerheads. "Well," said Richard superiorly, "you may just take it from me that there's nothing in it at all." "Ha!" He laughed shortly. He knew Mary. Then they got on a car and tried to behave as though their being together was a mere accident, as though they had not become engaged to one another within the previous 24 hours.